I am Dr. Christine Carmela Ramos. In this lecture, we will be looking at this ethical theory that contributes to human knowledge, a realization of the consequences of our judgments and actions.
The Philippines is composed of 7,641 islands, and it is divided into three central regions: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. There are 145 chartered cities in the country classified under these regions. The role of Philippine environmental indigenous thoughts in a global context will be addressed in this paper presentation. First, this presentation discusses and appreciates Filipino indigenous knowledge and how it shapes how our nation should address environmental challenges. Further, this presentation explains how Loob encompassed Filipinos' humanity and daily experiences. It gives a philosophical framework to the environment as it aspires to harmony with others and nature to be in one with God. Secondly, this presentation also focused on the two dimensions of Loob, interior and holistic. The internal Loob affirmed the innate goodness of the person. Loob is reconstructed not only the world but itself as well. The holistic model signified the unified entity of the world and the non-dualistic point of view of the world. The core concepts of Filipino worldview addressing environmental issues. The potential of the Filipino should be able to grow so that he will be aware of his uniqueness. In this view, individuals who possess the courage to speak and defend what they hold worthwhile should be encouraged rather than rebuked in education, government, or the environment. However, the I should expand from its identity with the family so that the individual does not only identify himself with a clan or self-interest, sacrificing the environment, but also with national identity. Filipinos should be brought up with the identity of the family members and simultaneously with that of the nation's common good. The Filipino perspective was defined as a part of sakop thinking. This means that the Filipinos do not separate themselves from the departed, radiating this belief to their relationship with nature and spirits. Loob, as both individual and universal, is morally characterized and remains thoroughly the responsibility of each individual. It affects the continuity of individual beings and the collective human existence. Further, Loob in a Christian perspective has individual and environmental aspects. The holistic concept of Loob springs the Filipino into a face-to-face encounter with God, transcending one's experience in the realm of spirituality. At this point, one is not invited to look up in heaven to experience God because my self-reflection has already reached celestial beings. Hence, I am not to forsake my humanity, but to genuinely be human. Quoting Emerita Quito, one of the Filipino pioneer thinkers, a person has to step out of the totality of which he is a part, reflect upon himself, and attain an identification of self with reality. The interior dimension of Loob focuses on human-heartedness, stressing compassion, kindness, harmony, conscience, and ethical dimension. Loob encourages sharing of self to a more profound religious perspective. Loob is God's will. The interrelational concept of Loob is deep-seated in the Christian idea of unity. For instance, Adam and Eve's story in Genesis came from an awareness that we need our neighbors and God. Accordingly, we are called to be in spiritual union with one another, with God, and especially with our environments. In this painting, we could also see the Filipino villagers in their bright clothes and straw hats planting together with a fresh and green landscape of plenty. And this painting is by Fernando Amorsolo, a Filipino national artist. Improving the status of humanity and society with regard to the Filipino loob and the local ways of life. Loob encompasses a Filipino's humanity, personality, theological perspective, and daily experiences. Loob aspires to harmony with others and nature, to be in union with God. Thus, the interpersonalistic characteristics of Loob explain the non-dualism in body, soul, and emotional rationale of the Filipinos. This Filipino belief was evident in farmers that would first consult the spirits before planting or taking down a tree, and fishermen offering something to the spirits for a good amount of catch. The traditional Filipino lived with nature, the forests, and rivers were his brothers. Their preservation and conservation were his life, their destruction his destruction. Moreover, people suffer when they go against nature. According to anthropologists, myths and folklore affect the general view of people's minds. A study on the indigenous Ilocano culture tackled the Bago myth. In short, the Filipino orientation to nature is part of his worldview, which is transpersonal. Beliefs such as gods and spirits are in the cultural norm, which people have believed for thousands of folklores. Most of these beliefs are in the form of stories in which gods take revenge on people who have greatly disturbed nature, causing the environment to prevent endangering the gods. The government plays a pivotal role in the judicial conservation and security in this vein. Unless the individual exercises freedom of initiative, authorities will control him. For the Filipinos, one does not entirely control one's destiny, like environments, natural calamities, and death. Instead, the individual is the controller of one's ship in a sea that is not entirely devoid of uncertainties. What are the impacts and opportunities of environmental philosophy scholars in the Philippines? As we usher in the new global realities, amidst the worldview of pandemic and geopolitical wars, further questions arise. Will this global citizenry increase inequality between states and regions, within those with education and those without? Who will survive these intensifying power struggles? Is technology a force for good or evil? Filipinos have their philosophies influenced by the rich blend of culture of the West and the East. Some of these philosophies are pakiramdam, pakikisama, and utang na loob. Philippine environmental perspectives are composed of these philosophies. It affects how Filipinos relate to the environment. One myth shows how the environment in that particular place changes as the gods living there are disturbed. This shows the pakiramdam and pakikisama beliefs of the Filipinos, as when gods were upset, the springs have dried up, the wildlife people used to hunt are now extinct, and even farm crops are failing. Thus, we can present the role of Philippine environmental philosophies in a global context as the abstract concept that can explain the ecological crisis the world is facing. Its profound philosophical ideas on how the environments relate to human actions. Therefore, we can remark that the way we believe and practice Filipino philosophies can either develop or worsen the environmental issues we are experiencing right now. The issue of climate change or harnessing the weather calls for international cooperation in research and treatises. More importantly, accomplishment requires regular actions to improve and preserve confidence among cooperating organizations or nations. Beyond the complexities of globalization, ultimately, each of us is probably the most significant single category of an agent in this process. As being with others in the world, people and not technology establish collaboration. Though technology can facilitate coordination, monitoring, and control in partnerships, ultimately, trust among partners determine the success or failure of alliances. Those in the world of science and technology must make science work more fully in the best interest of humanity. They should not merely justify the existence of intelligent human life, but fully enroll science and technology in the effort to preserve and improve life on Earth. Technology should not exploit or subordinate people, nor should it be used for warfare and destruction. Nothing is at stake in the struggle to make science and technology successful in the cause of humanity. Indigenous knowledge can help scholars better understand local communities and the land they live on and help them make informed decisions about how best to use their land for future generations. Indigenous people use indigenous forestry knowledge systems to safeguard forest resources and cultural values. In the Philippines, we have a lot of resorts, tourist spots, mining spots, and dams that damage or even disrupts ecological balance. This makes us wonder about the correct boundaries for our natural interference with nature. Nature does not offer a definitive solution. There is every reason to assume that technological innovation will be conditioned by social, economic, cultural, and political factors in the current Philippine economy. Nonetheless, suppose the poorest countries in Southeast Asia continue to sink into more dramatic poverty, social and political convulsions will take an unpredictable course. The goal is not to return to pre-technological conditions, but rather redefine a better way of life, a viable idea of abundance and a free, abundant type, not just to obtain more goods in the prevailing social economic system. The aim is to create new science and technology that would place us in harmony with the natural, human, and social environments instead of wasting them on power and profit. Technology should not be a fate one must choose for or against, but a challenge to our creativity. For instance, our country remains committed to improving the renewable energy sector through hydropower projects to serve electricity demand. In the Philippines, the primary source of livelihood, especially in the province and rural areas, is fishing and hunting. However, the environmental philosophy scholars in the country may find it hard to delve deeper into this because of animosity toward anti-hunting or anti-fishing attitudes that are unjustified in terms of ecological and preservation concerns. We should go beyond traditional farming, fishing, and livestock, growing knowledge, and adapt to our unique environmental conditions to improve, for instance, food security. In sum, this presentation shows that the concept of Loob rejects anthropocentrism while embracing intrinsic value theories and a firm holistic approach. Further, there should be a revamp of system of values, implementation of the actual application of participatory democracy, and the development of the cognitive abilities of each Filipino to solve the problem of living. Believing in freedom is not enough, it should be experienced. In this vein, Filipinos should accept up-to-date ideas and be resilient to change, future-oriented rather than tied to the past. Filipinos should also be trained to appreciate the value of organizing an efficient plan as we address environmental issues. These are daunting tasks as we collaborate to find impactful initiatives to address environmental problems in the country. In conclusion, as we continue to develop as a country facing various environmental issues, the role of the indigenous knowledge of the Philippines can be regarded as a guide and further reference for addressing these situations at hand. Considering that indigenous people are more familiar with their lands, their traditional knowledge and cultural heritage significantly enhance our nation's action towards climate change and other environmental matters. More importantly, we must acknowledge the rights and wisdom assessing these environmental issues have already beset their local lands due to ignorance of their culture. The Philippines has a rich indigenous culture branching to various skills, philosophies, and perceptions, which local communities developed with a long history of their surroundings, thereby promoting various concepts such as respect for customary laws and land rights, revegetating farms for soil and water conservation, managing a fine wood and fuel supply, and security for the biodiversity of local lands.